Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we retaking a deep dive into one of the most transformative periods in American history, the 3 decades from 1940 to 1970. This era wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was a whirlwind of change that completely reshaped the United States and its place in the world. From the battlefields of World War II to the moon landing, from the rise of suburbia to the roar of the civil rights movement. These 30 years were packed with conflict, prosperity, and revolution. So buckle up as we journey back in time to explore the forces that made modern America. Our story begins in 1940. The nation was still clawing its way out of the Great Depression, and a storm was brewing across the oceans. But while most Americans wanted to stay out of the conflict raging in Europe and Asia, President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw the growing threat of Axis powers. The attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, shattered any illusion of isolation. America was thrust into World War II, and the country mobilized on a scale never seen before. The war effort was monumental. Factories that once made cars were now churning out tanks and planes. Women, famously symbolized by Rosie the Riveter, flooded the workforce, taking on jobs traditionally held by men and proving their capabilities in countless new ways. This arsenal of democracy not only supplied the Allied forces but also pulled the American economy out of the Depression for good. On the home front, rationing, victory gardens, and war bonds became a part of everyday life. Everyone had a role to play. When the war ended in 1945, America emerged as a global superpower. But it faced a new kind of conflict, the Cold War. The world was now divided into two camps, led by the United States and the Soviet Union. This ideological battle between democracy and communism would dominate foreign policy for decades. The fear of communist expansion led to the Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, and the formation of NATO. It also sparked a terrifying nuclear arms race, where both sides stockpiled enough weapons to destroy the world many times over. The looming threat of nuclear war created a constant undercurrent of anxiety in American society. Back home, the post-war years ushered in an era of unprecedented economic prosperity. The GI Bill was a game-changer, offering returning veterans longages and funding for college education. This fueled two of the biggest trends of the 1950s: the housing boom and the rise of the suburbs. Families flocked to newly built communities like Levittown, chasing the American dream of a single-family home with a white picket fence and a car in the driveway. This led to the creation of the interstate highway system, which further connected the country and cemented America's love affair with the automobile. The 1950s are often remembered as a time of conformity and stability, a happy days era of poodle skirts and rock and roll, and for many white middle-class Americans, it was television became the dominant form of mass media, beaming idealized images of family life into living rooms across the nation. Stars like Elvis Presley and Marilyn Monroe became cultural icons. But beneath this polished surface, deep-seated inequalities and tensions were simmering. For African Americans, the post-war prosperity was largely out of reach. Jim Crow laws in the South enforced strict segregation, and discrimination was rampant across the country. The fight for equality had been going on for generations, but it gained powerful new momentum in the 1950s. The 1954 Supreme Court decision in Brown v. Board of Education declared school segregation unconstitutional, a landmark victory that ignited the modern civil rights movement. The movement was defined by the courage and determination of ordinary people and extraordinary leaders. Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her bus seat sparked the Montgomery bus boycott. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. rose to prominence, advocating for nonviolent civil disobedience, sit-ins at segregated lunch counters, freedom rides challenging interstate travel laws, and the historic 1963 March on Washington, where Dr. King delivered his "I Have a Dream" speech, captured the nation's attention and conscience. The passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965 were monumental legislative achievements, dismantling legal segregation and empowering millions of black voters. The 1960s began with a sense of optimism and youthful energy, embodied by the charismatic President John F. Kennedy and his new frontier. His call to ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country inspired a generation. The Peace Corps was born, and the nation committed itself to an audacious goal, landing a man on the moon before the end of the decade. This space race against the Soviet Union was a key battlefront of the Cold War, and in 1969 the world watched in awe as Neil Armstrong took that one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind. But the 60s were also a decade of profound turmoil and tragedy. The assassination of President Kennedy in 1963 sent shockwaves through the nation. His successor, Lyndon B. Johnson, launched his Great Society programs, a sweeping set of domestic initiatives aimed at eliminating poverty and racial injustice. Programs like Medicare, Medicaid, and Head Start were created and continue to shape American society today. However, Johnson's presidency would be defined and ultimately derailed by the Vietnam War. What began as a small advisory mission escalated into a full-blown conflict involving hundreds of thousands of American troops. The war was broadcast into American living rooms every night, bringing the brutal reality of the conflict home in a way no previous war had been. A powerful anti-war movement emerged, particularly on college campuses. The credibility gap between what the government was saying and what people were seeing fueled widespread disillusionment and protest. This period saw the rise of the counterculture. Young people, often called hippies, rejected the mainstream values of their parents' generation. They grew their hair long, listened to psychedelic rock music from artists like the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix, and questioned authority at every turn. It was a cultural revolution that promoted peace, love, and personal freedom, but also created a deep generation gap that divided families and communities. The late 60s were marked by social upheaval, including riots in major cities and the assassinations of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Robert F. Kennedy in 1968. A year of almost unimaginable turmoil. As the decade came to a close, America was a nation transformed, but also deeply divided. The period from 1940 to 1970 saw the United States go from an isolationist nation recovering from depression to a global superpower that had walked on the moon. It experienced unprecedented prosperity that created a thriving middle class. But it also confronted its long history of racial injustice head-on. It was an era of consensus and conflict, of dreams fulfilled and hopes shattered. The debates and struggles of these 30 years over civil rights, the role of government, and America's place in the world continue to echo in our society today. The world we live in was forged in the fire of these incredible decades. Thanks so much for watching. If you found this journey through American history interesting, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into the past. Let me know in the comments what part of this era fascinates you the most. See you in the next video.